There is a United States territory in the Pacific where the government will give you land, a house, and a monthly stipend just to show up. No, this is not a timeshare scam. It is a place so remote that America basically forgot it exists. And now they are desperate for anyone willing to live there. Everyone thinks United States territories are just Puerto Rico and maybe Guam, if they paid attention in geography class. But here is what nobody tells you. Scattered across the Pacific and the Caribbean are actual American territories so isolated, so economically struggling, and so desperate for population that they are offering deals that sound like they were written by someone who has never heard of real estate markets. These are the kind of deals that make you wonder if there is a catch. Spoiler alert, there usually is, but it might be worth it. We are counting down 12 forgotten United States territories where living costs approach zero. Some will literally pay you to exist there, and one place has housing so cheap you could buy property with what most people spend on coffee in a year. One territory has more sea turtles than permanent residents. Another is so remote, your mail comes by military transport every 3 months, and you learn to plan your life around supply ships, like it is the 1800s. And yes, one place technically has free land available, but the catch is you might be the only person on your entire island who speaks English and understands what Wi-Fi is, assuming Wi-Fi even exists there, which it probably does not. Think you know America's territories? Cool. Let us see if you are ready for places where United States citizenship comes with free housing, but Amazon Prime does not deliver. Your nearest hospital is a 6-hour boat ride away, and your biggest concern becomes whether the supply boat remembered to bring toilet paper. Like this video, if you have ever realized the best deals in America are not in America proper, and that cheap living always comes with interesting trade-offs. Subscribe because one day you will want to escape to somewhere nobody can find you. And this channel is basically your territorial relocation guide, with actual research instead of Instagram fantasies. Let us break it down. Number 12. American Samoa. American Samoa will let you live on some of the most beautiful islands in the Pacific for costs so low you will think the economy broke. And in some ways, it did. Welcome to the United States territory, where traditional village life meets American bureaucracy. American Samoa sits about 2,600 miles southwest of Hawaii, with around 55,000 people spread across 5 main islands. It is the only United States territory south of the equator, and people born here are United States nationals, not citizens, unless they go through naturalization. This legal quirk exists to protect traditional land systems. The islands are stunning, with rainforests, volcanic peaks, and coral reefs that make you understand why people write bad poetry about the ocean. But beneath the beauty is an economy that has been struggling since the tuna canneries started closing, and housing costs reflect that struggle in your favor. Here is what American Samoa costs. Median home price around $150,000. Most land is communally owned through the Fa'a Samoa system. Rent is approximately $600 to $800 per month. Cost of living is about 30% higher than the mainland for goods because everything ships in, but housing is dramatically lower. The job market is limited, with government jobs, the remaining tuna industry, and not much else. The catch is, you are not just moving to a cheap tropical island. You are moving into a culture with deep traditions, complex social hierarchies, and expectations about village participation. You cannot just show up and be a beach hermit. A researcher who spent time there wrote that American Samoa is cheap if you are willing to integrate into Fa'a Samoa. But that means attending village meetings that last hours, contributing to community events, and accepting that land tenure depends entirely on maintaining good relationships. You are not buying into paradise, you are being adopted by it. In short, American Samoa offers incredibly affordable tropical living for people willing to embrace a completely different cultural system. The financial costs are low. The social adaptation costs are high. Can we talk about distance? American Samoa is genuinely remote. You are over 2,000 miles from Hawaii, which is itself isolated. Flights are expensive, often over $1,000 round trip, and infrequent. If you need specialized medical care, you are getting on a plane to Hawaii or New Zealand. If you need something Amazon does not ship internationally, You are waiting months or doing without entirely. Picture yourself in a chalet with ocean views that cost millions anywhere else. Your rent is $700. The beach is 5 minutes away. Fresh fish costs almost nothing. Then you need a laptop part and realize the nearest Best Buy is 2,600 miles away, and your package has been in transit for 6 weeks. Sometimes cheap comes with a shipping surcharge to your sanity. Would you move somewhere tropical and cheap if it meant learning an entirely new cultural system and accepting you will never fully own land? Number 11. The Northern Mariana Islands. The Northern Mariana Islands can give you tropical island living for less than most mainland apartments, assuming you can handle being surrounded by World War II ruins and questionable economic prospects. The Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands includes 14 islands, with about 57,000 people, most living on Saipan. This place is closer to Asia than to America, which explains why most Americans have no idea it exists. The islands are beautiful. In that specific way war-scarred Pacific islands are. Beaches with sand so white it hurts to look at. Jungles so dense you could get lost 50 feet from a road. And every few hundred yards there is a Japanese bunker or an American tank slowly being reclaimed by vegetation. Tourism exists, but it struggles. The garment industry that once employed thousands collapsed when trade agreements changed. Here are typical costs. Median home price around $200,000. Less for older properties. Rent is approximately $800 to $1,200 per month, depending on island and condition. Cost of living is about 25% above the mainland, because literally everything is imported. The job market is tourism dependent, with some government work and teaching positions. Power is expensive because the islands generate electricity from imported fuel. Water can be unreliable, with rationing during dry seasons. And you are in Typhoon Alley, so plan accordingly. Someone who moved there described it as having all the benefits of paradise and all the challenges of living somewhere the mainland forgot existed 30 years ago. Power outages are common enough that you stop being surprised. Internet is slower than their grandmother's reading speed, but their apartment overlooks turquoise water and costs half of what they paid for a studio in California. In short, the Northern Mariana Islands offer affordable tropical living with American protections, but you accept infrastructure challenges that affect daily life and you face economic uncertainty. The rent is low because the prospects are uncertain. The World War II presence is genuinely everywhere. Saipan was the site of one of the bloodiest battles in the Pacific. There are memorials, old fortifications, bunkers you can walk into, and reminders everywhere that this beautiful island has a dark history soaked into the landscape. You cannot walk a mile without encountering something that reminds you thousands died here. Picture yourself on a beach at sunset. The water is impossibly blue. To your left is a rusting Japanese tank being consumed by jungle. Behind you is a memorial listing civilian names. Your rent is $900, genuinely affordable. But electricity is $300 because power is expensive 6,000 miles from the mainland. Sometimes paradise comes with complicated baggage. Number 10. U.S. Virgin Islands tax incentives. The U.S. Virgin Islands will not give you free housing, but tax incentive programs can reduce your effective costs dramatically if you qualify. The territory includes St. Thomas, St. John, and St. Croix, with about 105,000 residents. People born here are U.S. citizens automatically, with full rights. The Economic Development Commission offers tax incentives that can reduce income taxes to nearly nothing if you meet the requirements. It is not free housing, but when you are paying 4% income tax instead of 37%, housing effectively costs a fraction. Here is the U.S. Virgin Islands situation. Median home price is around $350,000. Rent runs about $1,500 to $2,500 per month. Cost of living is about 26% above the mainland. But if you qualify for Economic Development Commission benefits, you may pay as little as 4% income tax on U.S. Virgin Islands source income. You need to establish bona fide residence and meet physical presence requirements. The IRS watches this closely. One person who relocated said the U.S. Virgin Islands is expensive until you factor in tax savings. Then the math makes sense. They pay more for groceries and rent, but keep an extra $40,000 a year in tax savings. The weather is perfect year-round. The beaches are incredible. They are basically getting paid tens of thousands to live in paradise. The U.S. Virgin Islands offer Caribbean living with tax structures that subsidize housing for people with the right income. It is strategically cheap if you qualify. Can we address hurricanes? The U.S. Virgin Islands get hit hard and often. Hurricane Maria devastated parts of the islands in 2017. Infrastructure took years to recover. Living here means hurricane preparedness is not optional. It is essential. Insurance is expensive. Evacuation plans are necessary. Every June, you are watching weather patterns with obsessive intensity. Picture yourself on your deck overlooking Caribbean waters. You are running your business remotely, pulling in mainland income. Your tax rate dropped from 35% to 4%. You are saving tens of thousands annually. Then hurricane season starts, and you are filling sandbags while calculating if tax savings are worth the existential dread of watching a Category 4 approach. Guam won't give you free housing, but military personnel and defense contractors can access housing at rates so subsidized they are essentially living free compared with the private market. Guam is America's strategic Pacific outpost, with about 170,000 people. It is a major military hub with significant Air Force and Navy presence. The military builds extensive housing for personnel. Contractors often receive housing allowances that cover most or all local rent. The median home price is around $400,000 for civilians. Military housing is provided at no cost for qualifying service members. Defense contractors often receive allowances of $2,000 to $3,000 per month as part of compensation. Civilian rent runs from $1,500 to $2,500 per month. Cost of living is about 24% above the mainland. The job market is heavily military and tourism. Guam works if you are military, a contractor, or working in supporting industries. Your housing may be provided, or your compensation may cover it completely. You can effectively be living for free while earning mainland or better wages. The catch is, you are 6,000 miles from the mainland, prone to typhoons, and the local economy depends almost entirely on military spending. One contractor said Guam pays better than the mainland with housing covered, so they are banking serious money, but they have not seen family in 18 months. Power goes out weekly, and everything takes longer than it should. In short, Guam offers effectively free housing in the right employment sectors, but you are committing to remote island life where daily life revolves around military infrastructure. Traffic is absurd. Guam is 30 miles long, with traffic that can rival Los Angeles. There is one main road, and everyone uses it. You will spend an hour driving 8 miles. Snakes are a real problem. Brown tree snakes are everywhere. They are invasive and they destroy native bird populations. You will encounter them, and they appear in places snakes should not be. Picture your housing completely covered by your employer. You are saving $2,500 per month. You are near stunning beaches. Then you spend 90 minutes in traffic driving 12 miles, power goes out again, and a snake falls from your ceiling onto your keyboard during a video call. Number 8. American Samoa Village Integration. This section focuses on village housing where costs can approach zero if you fully commit. In Fa'a, Samoa, land is controlled by families and villages through complex kinship networks. If you marry in, establish deep relationships, or contribute significantly to village life, you can be granted use rights to land. Construction costs are your responsibility. Construction for a basic home ranges from $30,000 to $80,000 depending on materials and size. You do not own the land in the Western sense. Your use rights depend on maintaining relationships. Monthly costs can be under $500 if you live simply. The job market inside villages is almost non-existent. People work remotely, fish, farm, or find creative income sources. Village living means participating fully in Fa'a, Samoa. You attend meetings that last hours. You contribute financially and physically to events. You respect chiefs who hold real authority, and you accept that individual autonomy matters less than community harmony. One person who attempted this described it as the cheapest living ever and the most socially complex. Land was free, but they were expected at every function, and they were asked to contribute $500 to a family wedding they had not budgeted for. Saying no was not really an option without social consequences. They saved money on housing, but spent it differently on obligations they had not anticipated. Village housing can cost almost nothing if you are willing to become part of a traditional structure. where obligations are social rather than financial. Your rent may be zero, but your time is not your own. Samoan time is real. Things happen when they happen. Appointments are suggestions. Punctuality is not a value. If you need structure and schedules, village life will systematically break every expectation you have. Picture yourself building a home on family land for $40,000, with monthly costs under $400. You wake to ocean sounds, you fish for dinner, and your life is simple and costs almost nothing. Then you are expected at a 6-hour village meeting, a family wedding where you contribute $500 you did not budget, and a communal workday in brutal heat. Sometimes the cheapest option costs everything except traditional rent. Johnston Atoll is so restricted that technically you cannot live there, but it is worth mentioning because it represents the extreme end of forgotten America. Johnston sits about 800 miles southwest of Hawaii, covers less than 3 square miles, and has 0 permanent residents. It has been a U.S. possession since 1858. It was used for nuclear testing and chemical weapons storage. Now it is a national wildlife refuge, closed to public access. The infrastructure remains in abandoned form. Buildings slowly deteriorate. Runways once used for military operations are being reclaimed by seabirds. The site feels truly abandoned. If access ever opened, you would need to be completely self-sufficient. For now, there is no public access, and it is closed to civilians. Current population is 0 humans and millions of seabirds. Historical use includes nuclear and chemical weapons programs. If it opened, housing could be effectively free, but logistics and remediation would make costs astronomical. Johnston will likely never open to civilian settlement. The contamination history, remoteness, and lack of economic purpose mean it will remain a wildlife refuge. Someone who visited on a research permit described it as the most beautiful and haunting place they had seen. Abandoned buildings, pristine beaches, complete isolation. In short, Johnston represents the theoretical extreme where living costs could be 0 because there is no economy. You cannot and will not be allowed to move to Johnston. This entry shows how many U.S. territories Americans have forgotten. Picture yourself, hypothetically, on an abandoned atoll. Buildings crumble. Seabirds outnumber your memories of human contact. You might have perfect solitude, 0 costs, and absolutely no legal way to get there. Number 6. Palmyra Atoll research positions. Palmyra is slightly more accessible than Johnston, so scientists can go there, and if you are qualified, you might get a research position that includes free housing. Palmyra sits about 1,000 miles south of Hawaii. It is privately owned but designated a national wildlife refuge. There are between 4 and 20 researchers there depending on the season. The Nature Conservancy manages the atoll for conservation research. If you are a marine biologist or an ecologist, positions sometimes open that include housing, food, and the experience of living on one of the most remote atolls in the Pacific. For researchers, the cost is 0. Housing and food are provided as part of the position. Positions are temporary, usually for weeks to months, and requirements include scientific credentials and a clear project justification. Population on station hovers around a dozen people who maintain the research facility. There is no economy, no services, and no option to just move there. You are there for research, living in basic, communal housing, completely isolated. One researcher who spent 3 months on Palmyra said it offered incredible marine research and the most challenging living situation. There is no phone and no internet. If something goes wrong medically, evacuation can take days. In short, Palmyra offers free housing if you are a qualified researcher willing to live in isolation for science. This is not a relocation option. It is a temporary opportunity that eliminates housing costs because civilization does not exist there. Acknowledge the romanticism trap. Remote atolls sound amazing until you are actually there. No coffee shop. No backup plan. Your entertainment is work, the ocean, and the other people on station. Picture yourself on Palmyra. Housing is free, and food is provided. You are researching pristine reefs that few humans see. Then you get sick, and you realize the nearest hospital is 3 days away by boat. You might spend a week hoping it is not appendicitis, while continuing to catalog fish species. Wake Island is a restricted territory where civilian access exists only through military contractor positions. Those positions include housing and food, making it effectively free living while you bank your salary. Wake is a coral atoll about 2,300 miles west of Hawaii. It saw intense fighting during World War II and now serves as an emergency landing site with a small military and contractor population. Contractors receive housing and meals as compensation. You live in dormitory-style housing, eat in communal dining, work long hours, and housing and food costs are zero, so your salary is entirely bankable. Here is the Wake deal. Positions are available periodically through defense contractors. Housing and meals are provided at no cost. Salaries are often $50,000 to $80,000. Contracts typically last 6 months to a year. You are on an island with about 100 people. No town, no economy, nothing to spend money on. The appeal is that you can bank your entire paycheck. There is no rent, no groceries, no expenses. You finish a contract with savings that would take years elsewhere. The catch is total isolation and demanding work schedules, because there is nothing else to do. Someone who worked a year described it as the best savings year and the most monotonous of their life. Housing was basic, food was cafeteria style, and with zero expenses, they saved $60,000. But they watched every movie twice, and by month 10, they questioned their sanity. The isolation broke people. Relationships formed and imploded in the tiny community. In short, Wake offers free housing and food with bankable salaries. But you are trading a year for isolation, making solitary confinement seem social. Activities are limited. Work, walk the beach, lift weights, watch movies, sleep. That is it. No town, no bar, no entertainment. You are on a coral atoll with a runway and buildings. If you need external stimulation to function, Wake will destroy you over months. Picture finishing a shift. You are paid well, housing is free. You walk to the beach and watch the same sunset you have seen for 200 days. Your bank account grows. Your sense of time dissolves into identical routines where weeks vanish. Number 4. Midway Atoll positions. Midway is famous for the World War II battle. Today, it is a national wildlife refuge with extremely limited positions that include free housing for people who maintain the refuge. Midway sits at the northwestern end of the Hawaiian archipelago, about 1,300 miles from Honolulu. It has fewer than 60 people, mostly U.S. Fish and Wildlife employees and contractors. Positions are rare, but include refuge management and maintenance. Housing and meals are provided as part of employment. Salaries follow federal pay scales. Contracts last from months to years. The population is tiny. Everyone knows everyone, and social dynamics matter intensely. The job market is non-existent outside refuge operations. One person who worked 18 months said it was incredible for history buffs, but brutal for anyone needing variety. Housing was fine, food was adequate, but the social scene was 50 people recycling conversations for months. Personality conflicts became major issues because you could not escape them. Cabin fever became a medical concern. In short, Midway offers free housing through rare positions requiring isolation most people cannot sustain. Midway also has the world's largest Laysan albatross colony. There are hundreds of thousands of birds. They are everywhere, constantly. Beautiful, majestic, and also loud, messy, and occasionally aggressive. You will dream about albatrosses. You will smell like them. Your entire existence becomes albatross adjacent. This is living inside an active colony where humans are the minority species. Picture government housing on Midway. Rent is zero. You are walking where the Battle of Midway was fought. The historical weight is everywhere. Then you realize you have had the same conversation with the same 12 people for the 4th week. Albatrosses are nesting on your doorstep, making sounds at 4 in the morning, and the supply ship will not arrive for another month. Puerto Rico is not offering widespread free housing, but post-hurricane recovery programs in rural areas have created situations where costs drop to nearly nothing if you are willing to help rebuild. Puerto Rico has about 3.2 million residents. After Hurricane Maria in 2017, rural areas depopulated as residents fled to the mainland United States. Some communities now offer extremely cheap housing, work trade arrangements, or land access to people willing to move and participate in rebuilding. Certain municipalities, particularly in the mountainous interior, offer cheap or free land for people committing to build and stay. Rural areas have abandoned homes acquired cheaply or through sweat equity. The cost of living is about 5% higher than the mainland United States for goods, but housing can be dramatically cheaper. You can find structurally sound homes under $50,000 in recovering areas. The job market varies, strong in San Juan and major tourist areas, and weak in the rural interior. Some programs target remote workers willing to relocate and contribute to the local economy while drawing outside income. The appeal is tropical United States territory living, where you are a full citizen at costs approaching free if you are strategic. The weather is incredible year-round, and the culture is rich. You are genuinely helping communities that need people. The challenge is that infrastructure is still recovering. Power is unreliable to the point of being a lifestyle factor. Communities are rebuilding from collective trauma. One person who relocated said they got property for almost nothing, cheap enough to pay cash without touching savings, but they function without reliable power for weeks at a time on a regular basis. Internet cuts constantly, making remote work a challenge. People learn rainwater collection, generator maintenance, and cooking on gas when electricity is out. In short, Puerto Rico offers nearly free housing in recovering areas if you are willing to help rebuild and accept infrastructure challenges. Luma Energy took over the grid in 2021, and that takeover is controversial. Outages are frequent. In rural areas still recovering, power can be out for weeks. If you require reliable electricity, Puerto Rico's infrastructure might not be ready. That reality shapes daily decisions about when to do laundry, when to cook, and when to charge everything. Maintaining backup systems becomes standard practice. Picture a rural home you acquired for $30,000. Mountains surround you. The weather is perfect. Neighbors are grateful that you are helping. Then power goes out for the 8th time this month. Your generator runs out of fuel because the gas station also has no power, and you are finishing work on your phone hotspot in your car. Number 2. Howland and Baker Islands, desolate atolls. Howland and Baker Islands are tiny, uninhabited atolls in the Pacific that represent some of the most forgotten U.S. territory. Both are part of the U.S. minor outlying islands, essentially coral islands with zero infrastructure. Howland is famous as the island Amelia Earhart was trying to reach when she disappeared in 1937. Baker Island is nearby, equally desolate. Both are national wildlife refuges, closed to public access. If, hypothetically, you could access these islands, which you cannot, housing would be whatever you could create because nothing exists. Costs would be zero because there is no economy, no structures, no services. Their current status is simple. Both are completely closed to civilians. Historically, Howland once had a small airstrip built for Earhart's flight, now abandoned and reclaimed by nature. Current population, 0 humans, and nesting seabirds in large numbers. Hypothetical living costs approach zero because nothing exists, but survival would be nearly impossible. These islands are mostly exposed coral with almost no elevation, no fresh water sources, and no vegetation beyond scrub. The conditions are brutal. The realistic path for limited access is to become a researcher with a project that justifies temporary visits, and even then access is measured in weeks, not years. One researcher who visited described them as some of the most remote and harsh places under U.S. jurisdiction. No resources. Brutal sun. The islands sit barely above sea level. They are significant for their emptiness, and because Earhart's disappearance made Howland historically important. But visiting makes clear why they remain uninhabited. In plain terms, Howland and Baker represent theoretical free living because nothing exists to cost anything, but also nothing exists to support human life. Picture an exposed coral reef that is technically American territory. There is no structure, no water, no food. You are camping on coral with seabirds, wondering how territorial acquisition works when territory is functionally uninhabitable. Your housing cost is zero because housing is a concept that does not apply to a coral reef. Number 1. Navassa Island, complete isolation. Navassa Island takes the top spot as the most forgotten United States territory, where living would technically be free, because absolutely nobody is there. and nobody wants to be there. Navassa sits between Jamaica and Haiti, covers about 2 square miles of mostly steep cliffs, and is one of the most disputed United States possessions. The island is claimed by Haiti, but administered by the United States as a wildlife refuge that is completely closed to public access. It has no permanent residents and exists mainly as a wildlife sanctuary and a maritime claim. The island was used for guano mining in the 1800s. Operations were brutal enough that they resulted in worker uprisings and violence. It was abandoned once easily accessible guano was depleted. Since the early 1900s, it has been uninhabited except for occasional Coast Guard visits and rare scientific expeditions. If you somehow obtained permission, housing would be whatever shelter you could create, because the only structures are mining ruins over a century old and structurally unsound. Costs would be zero for land, because no formal land ownership exists, but survival costs would include everything needed to sustain life with no infrastructure. Here is the Navassa reality. Current status: closed wildlife refuge. Historical use: guano mining that ended more than a century ago. Current population: 0. Ownership disputed between the United States and Haiti. Access requires federal permits that are almost never granted except for legitimate research. The island has steep cliffs that drop to the ocean, making landing dangerous, with limited beach access, and terrain actively hostile to human presence. Even if you could legally access Navassa, which you almost certainly cannot, living there would be extreme survival requiring total self-sufficiency. There is no fresh water anywhere, no food except what you catch from the ocean, no shelter except ruins or what you build, no communication, no rescue if anything goes wrong. One scientist who visited on a research permit described Navassa as spectacularly beautiful and genuinely dangerous. Cliffs drop hundreds of feet to the ocean. The terrain is difficult to traverse. Visiting was incredible, but the idea of living there is insane because you would be completely on your own with no safety net, no backup plan, and no rescue option if anything went wrong medically or otherwise. In short, Navassa represents the absolute extreme where housing is free because society does not exist. Access is prohibited, and even if you got there, the island itself would likely kill you. Why this matters strategically? Navassa's importance is entirely strategic and symbolic. Possessing it gives the United States maritime claims in the Caribbean and access to surrounding waters, including fishing rights. It is valuable as a wildlife refuge for conservation, but as a place for humans to actually live, it has less than zero value, which is why it tops this list as the ultimate cheap living option that is actually impossible. Picture yourself on Navassa, having somehow bypassed all restrictions. You are standing on cliffs above Caribbean waters that crash violently below. Seabirds circle in massive numbers, their calls echoing off rock faces. The ruins of 19th century guano operations crumble around you, testament to the last time humans tried to work this island and how badly it ended. You have complete solitude that humans almost never experience. You have zero costs, because costs do not exist where economy does not exist. And you have the slowly dawning realization that you are trapped with no fresh water, no food beyond what you can catch, no shelter beyond collapsing ruins, and no way off until the next Coast Guard visit, which might be in 6 months, if they remember and if weather permits. Sometimes the cheapest option is priceless because the actual cost is everything, including quite possibly your life. Navassa offers the cheapest housing in any U.S. territory because housing does not exist. People are not allowed, and even if they were, the island would be deadly because of basic survival challenges. Be honest. Would you take free housing on an uninhabited U.S. territory if it meant complete isolation and questionable chances of survival? Yes, I am that desperate for cheap rent. Or no, I prefer my housing to include walls and to keep me alive. Drop your isolation tolerance below, because we just counted down 12 forgotten United States territories, where cheap living ranges from realistic to theoretical. Like this video, if you just learned America owns islands, you will never visit. Subscribe, because knowing which territories are accessible versus which are seabird colonies might save you from an expensive mistake. These territories are real. Housing costs range from low to non-existent, and most Americans will never know they are options, because forgotten means exactly that.